Hey guys, James Cellucci here, back for another one of these great video lectures. Today we will be talking about sports in the 1930s. During the Great Depression, sports filled people with excitement and gave both women and men an opportunity to find hope in their lives in a time where there wasn't much hope to begin with. There were a variety of sports that started in the 1930s. Today we are going to begin with football. The National Football League, or NFL, hosted its first college football draft in 1936. Prior to this draft, college football players chose their own team. One of football's most influential quarterbacks, Sammy Ball, started his NFL career in 1937. Ball was one of the first NFL quarterbacks to regularly use the forward pass in an offensive scheme. Now we are going to talk about basketball in the 1930s. Basketball was still a relatively new sport at the beginning of the 30s, at least on the pro level. The first big pro league, the American Basketball League, went obsolete in 1931. The National Basketball League arrived in the middle of the decade, and it would eventually merge with the Basketball Association of America to become the National Basketball Association, aka the NBA. Boxing was such a huge sport in the 1930s that it carried another industry. Broadcasting to prominence, sales of radios in the decade soared in part because people wanted to hear the call of the big fight. The holder of the heavyweight champions belt was arguably the most famous athlete in the world in the 30s. 6 boxers, including Max Schmeling, Max Baer, and Cinderella Man James Braddock held the title in the 30s. Until African-American Joe Louis claimed it in 1937. Louis held it until 1949. Championship fights were so big that 70,000 people packed Yankee Stadium for the 1938 rematch between Louis and Schmeling.
Major League Baseball had 18 teams in the 1930s and sold more than 83 million tickets. The New York Yankees were the best team in the 1930s, winning 5 World Series titles. Some of the Yankees' noblest players were Lou Gehrig, Joe DiMaggio, and Babe Ruth. Other famous players were in the 1930s were Mel Oates of the New York Giants and Jimmy Fox of the Philadelphia Athletics. The star player in the early 1930s was Babe Ruth. Ruth quit the Yankees in 1934, leaving the spotlight to Lou Gehrig. The New York Yankees, however, were the dominant team of the decade. The team won 4 consecutive World Championships in 1933 and through 1939. The St. Louis Cardinals were the most colorful team in the mid-1930s. The filthy uniforms and the tough reputation of the team earned them the nickname the Gas House Gang. Using older players like Pepper Martin and young stars like Dizzy Dean, who won 30 games and saved 7, the Cardinals put together a legendary season in 1934 and won the World Series, defeating Detroit in the dramatic 7th game series. There were also Negro leagues in the 1930s, with the Homestead Grays emerging as the power team in the Negro American League, formed in 1937. In 1934, the Joint Rules Committee on softball collaborated to create a set of standardized rules. Up until this point, the game was being played with varied rules, players' positions, and ball sizes. The original softball used by the Farragut Boat Club was 16 inches in circumference. Lewis Roberts Sr., the man responsible for the organization of softball games for firefighting in Minneapolis, used a 12-inch ball. Roberts' ball won out as the preferred ball size, and professional softball games today are played using a 10 to 12-inch softball. The 1932 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles, California, had low participation numbers, because many international athletes were unable to pay for the trip. However, in 1932, the Games were the first to have an Olympic Village. When Franklin D. Roosevelt, the governor of New York, opened the Games of the 1932 Winter Olympics, there was little accompanying fanfare. The bleachers at the opening ceremonies in Lake Placid, New York, were mostly empty. Much of the world was still in throes of the Great Depression, most concerned with finding work and putting food on the table. Only 17 nations sent athletes to the Games. Just 4 in the U.S., Canada, Germany, and Poland fielded hockey teams, down from 11 in 1928. The United States entry had 14 players, 5 from Yale, and took the silver medal, missing out on the chance for gold only because of a technicality. Stella Walsh lived in the United States, but ran for her native country of Poland in track events ranging from the United States national championships to the Olympics. Walsh set 20 world records and won 41 U.S. national titles between 1930 and 1954. She won the gold medal in the 100-meter race in the 1932 Olympics and took the silver for the same event in the 1936 Olympics. This is one of the athletes we're going to touch on mostly because she had a very large impact on the Olympics, and you'll hear a lot about Jesse Owens in the 1936 Olympics later on in the year, but that just gives you an insight into the Olympians.